Wonderful. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. And first, let me just say it's an awesome thing for me to be up here because this is my first opportunity to share my story nationally. So, of course, my friends and family know, people within my ministry, people at church know, but this is really big for me. So, thank you for the opportunity. And so, I'm here to talk about the first post-cervical cancer life and the missing link being spirituality. And so, who I am a conqueror over cancer. That is the name of my chapter. I am the Inglewood, California chapter leader. And so we're conquerors over cancer. And who I am let me first just say this. Each of you are my heroes who are survivors. And I want to say that because I've had it's been challenging for me to share my story because my story does not include being diagnosed with HPV. I am out of that 9%, that 9 or 10% that has been diagnosed with cervical cancer, and there was no HPV. So I have felt for a very long time, if I'm going to share my story to a group of women who have HPV, how do they accept me? How do they relate to me? And how can I actually give them anything? But always God is divine because this is how I got linked up. So I'm talking to you about spirituality, which is how, for me, I have been carried in my journey since the beginning of my diagnosis. And so, obedience has really been my weapon. And because we're talking about spirituality, I am going to talk to you and say some things, faith-based. But my obedience is what really kept me. It was my weapon, and it has been my weapon. To share briefly my story, when my doctor called to tell me she wanted to go back and forth about doing the biopsy. And then she said, but then the next step is surgery. And then when we get to surgery, we can get in a little bit further. And then when we're in further, we can still do biopsy, but we're able to see what else is being covered or what else is there. After she told me we think we see cancer cells. I worked at the hospital at the time, so I knew that when they say we think we see, they know that we need you to come in right away. Plus my doctor called me at home on a Friday evening. So I struggled with this conversation with her, going back and forth. And I caught that she said surgery allows us to go in deeper and I can still get the biopsy. My obedience kicked in because I heard the Spirit say, do it now. Do it right away. And so I tell her, okay, when I come back to work on Tuesday, I'm actually going to be scheduling surgery. Long story short, when I woke up from surgery, she was crying. And I said, well, what's the problem? Is it everywhere, or what did you really find? And she said, the God that you serve. And then she stopped. She said, I just want to tell you that because you persevered and you went back and forth with me, when we went in to do the surgery, we found that the cancer was already on your cervix. And we were also able to burn off the cells that we saw. So, my obedience is my weapon. And trusting has always been my saving grace because I continue to trust. I trusted when he said, do it right away. And I trust him still today when he said, it is gone, never to return. So for me, my spirituality has been with me from the very beginning of my journey. And gratefulness is my motivation. So as I continue to be grateful, I'm going to continue to be motivated to do what I need to do. So the missing link is spirituality. And it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what faith you practice. It is about believing in something that is greater than you and understanding that you did not do this on your own. You did not come here on your own. And plenty of times we need to dig into that. So, with spirituality, as I said, is connecting to something bigger than us. And then we start to have all these questions about, well, what does this all mean? Our spiritual walks are just that. It is connecting to something that is bigger than us. It's when we start to tap in and we start to try to find the meaning of life. And so we're asking these questions about, well, what does this all mean for me? And as a survivor or as someone who's been diagnosed with something like a cancer, with cervical cancers, well, what does this mean for me? What have I done? Why did it happen to me? And so you can imagine for me, hearing that HPV is the cause for cervical cancer, but then having my doctor confirm, no, there has not been any HPV. It's clear, it's not there, it's never has been there. I went to the extent of making sure that we look back at my records, because of course you hear that, well, a lot of people, they miss it. You know, you may have had an STD that you didn't catch and you didn't take care of it. Then it turned into HPV, and I've always known my body. I've been very in tune with my body since my first pap smear at 16 years old. My diagnosis was at 36. And so I've never not known what was going on inside of me. Like many of you as women, we know our bodies. So then the question becomes, well, why me? Why am I here? Why did this happen? And of course, we can't really answer those questions, so we're asking the questions like, really, God? What's going on? And that's where the relationship that you have with your faith, with your creator, whoever he is, whoever she is the God of many names. You can call him whatever you want to. That's when your relationship is going to kick in, because now you're asking these questions and your faith is going to be tested. And you're going to trust whatever you believe. You're going to trust what you hear from who your greater power is. And then the belief and your obedience. It's continuing to walk in the obedience. So for me personally, continuing to do what I hear all the time. Don't eat that. Really looking at some cancer, you know, they have a cancer Bible. So I've begun to look at some books, but I have to believe what I was reading, not just, okay, God, I hear you. He's sending me the information that I need. So I'm obedient to now changing some of the ways that I eat and adding some things to my diet and not eating too much of this. I love junk food. I eat whatever I want to at any time of the day, any time of the night. We had this conversation last night. And so I have been consistent though with eating fresh foods and organic foods though. So in the morning time I have a salad and I'm eating more fruits and more vegetables early in the day so that I get the fuel that I need. And that's also in addition to my coffee, because I don't stop that at all. And in the spiritual walk we find a sense of greater love, which is really important, because we can miss that piece of loving ourselves through this process, being really hard on ourselves, especially when we don't know. We're trying to figure out, well, what did I do? Did I really miss something? Was I that careless? You know, and then we're thinking about the stigma that is so attached to HPV and cervical cancer. Am I really that woman? And was I that promiscuous? You know, we're asking these questions. So loving on ourselves is a really bigger piece. And connecting that to the missing link of spirituality, there is no greater love that you will find when you're in a relationship with whoever your higher power is. And of course, there's power. And Rena, who is not here, I had an awesome conversation with Jane and with Rena in prepping for this, because of course Jane has done this piece before. So it was really important that we connected so that I can get some tutelage from her and get some of her wisdom and how she's done this previously. And one of the things that Rena said was that the journey starts at diagnosis and it carries through the rest of your life. And that was really deep for me, because I remembered falling back when I was on the phone with my doctor, and at that moment I felt like I was in a whole different space in my life. And it was all because of a conversation that is based on the diagnosis. And so these are just some really cute pictures here about how things get affected. So we have changes in our moods, and all of this is tying into the spiritual link, because when we have a relationship, again, with a higher power, and we're tapping into that, all this stuff here kind of gets a little bit better. It's a little helpful. So there's a lot of trauma that comes to a person in different ways when you're diagnosed with cervical cancer. And if you don't find yourself in any of this, then piece up with how I've been feeling, just kind of relate to it. But emotionally, it's a big strain. Mentally, you know, it's those thoughts and those questions, how you're gonna deal with this. We fall into depression. We wanna be alone, we isolate ourselves, we don't wanna talk talk to anyone, we feel a certain way about ourselves. And mentally, physically. The physical thing about after the diagnosis and even when you're in treatment and you're in therapy, the physical thing is the obvious thing. People know that you're going through something, but people don't know what you're going through here. And people don't know what you're going through here. And so with having that relationship, connecting your spirituality and connecting your spiritual walk, whatever that looks like to you, whatever that looks like for you, wherever you are on a spiritual level, when you connect that, you can get some type of comfort. We have to understand that the Spirit, in whatever form He comes in for you, is your help. He's our comforter. So with your spiritual connection, and you link that with your diagnosis in cervical cancer, you have to understand that you're not alone. So you might be by yourself sometimes. However, you're not alone, because the Spirit is a help. The Spirit is a guide. So it goes back to that obedience for me. And who's affected to these changes in moods? Everybody is. Totally us, but our families and our close ones. My brother, he couldn't come in. He really couldn't see me. And I don't want to say all men. I don't want to give you guys this thing. But my brother and my father was always the same way. So whether it was that time of the month, they really weren't around. And then my brother, after I had surgery, he came in very, very briefly. He came in and came up to my bedroom because I couldn't walk up and down the stairs, so everything was brought to me. And he came in and he had a bouquet of flowers and he had a card. And he sat down beside the bed and he kissed me and he said, "All right, feel better." And he walked out. And I said, "Okay, I love you." And he turned around and said, "I love you too." Because it was difficult for him. So how we're changing and what we're going through, people are affected also. We don't just get the diagnosis. Our families get the diagnosis. Our loved ones get the diagnosis. And so all of what we're going through, they have on their level the same thing. And the way I think about it, when I continue to link it to spirituality, there's nothing that we cannot overcome. There's nothing that we cannot get through when we tap in. It's really about tapping in. And then I started to deal with the changes in the moods thing, because we know that there are stages of grief. And then I thought about being diagnosed with cervical cancer, and I looked at it as a psychology student, as a major. I'm thinking about, well, it's almost like you lose a part of you. So we're grieving to a certain extent. And for me, at the time of being 36 years old, still contemplating whether I have a child, and my daughter now is 19 years old. But back then I'm thinking, maybe I can still have a child if I get married. Maybe my husband will want more children. But then there's an issue with this thing where my cervix is shorter now. So it's shorter, and pregnancy is not going to be difficult, but then what if the baby comes early and the baby doesn't survive? And then there's all these things that are going on in my head, and then I started to feel a certain way all over again. Just all over again. And I realized that, I went through these stages all over again. And I had to deal with, okay, so I already know that I've been diagnosed, so maybe it really wasn't that, and the fact that it was taken away so soon. And let me just backtrack, because my diagnosis was October 31st. I had the conversation with my doctor November 4th. And when I scheduled my surgery, it was November 30th. So it all happened really fast for me. It was extremely fast. And when it happened so fast, I had the tendency, and sometimes I still do, I have a tendency to act like it didn't happen, because it didn't happen. But then I realized that from time to time I was going through this denial thing, like that it really wasn't me. Oh yeah, then I'm not that because it's not HPV, so no. None of this really happened to me until someone said, "So aren't you a survivor, a cancer survivor?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I am." And then they want to hear about the NCCC, and then they want to hear about what I'm doing with the chapter, and then I kind of have to get kicked back into gear. So there are these periods of denial, and of course we've gone through the anger. Why, God, how could you do this? Angry at myself, again. What did I do? And the depression kind of kept coming back and forth. what do I do? And the bargaining was really funny to me. I'm like, okay, God, so if I do this and I eat right, are you sure you're not gonna give it back? Like, is it not ever gonna come? Like, how do I really do this with you? Let's talk about this thing. And the acceptance finally just came in. And I think that the piece for me in accepting was having the conversations that I had with Rena. Even though we didn't have a lot of telephone conversations, she is such a follow-up person. I love it. I mean, she just checks in, email, hey, just checking in, how was that event? Don't forget to send that. But how are you feeling? You know, tell me what's going on. And it was almost like she was that angel that would kick in when I needed her to, because she made me remember why I was here and why I was motivated to continue to do the work that I'm doing right now. So what's the balance? We keep talking about it, I'm saying it. It's the spiritual link. And it's the tap in. It's just a tap in. It's the tap, it's the call on your higher power. And it's nothing but a conversation. I have friends that laugh because, like, you talk to God like he's your homeboy. Well, I talk to him the way I talk to people. So I'm having a conversation with you, and in my prayer time, God, I don't even know what to say right now. So whatever it is I need, just give it to me. Or, God, you already know this is going on, and tell me what to do. Show me the way. It's really about understanding that we're here to connect to other people, but we're also here to do a service to other people. And each of us, from what I have learned in my experience in this walk, in this journey of cervical cancer, is it happened for me for a reason, to be able to speak to other people. So when I tap into my spiritual aspect of my cervical cancer diagnosis, it reminds me that somebody else needs it greater than I do. So I continue to have the conversations, and I continue to tap into spirit to find out what it is I'm supposed to be doing next. What's the next chapter event supposed to look like? Who am I supposed to reach out to? So I had a mini health fair back in January. And the mini health fair was, yes, all these women are gonna come, I'm gonna give them all this great information, but how many people can I tap into? Really? So then I turned it into, it's just a mini health fair where men come out. And then I had people come and talk about prostate and colon cancer, and then people were there for breast cancer. And then we talked about AIDS and HIV, and then we gave them some options. So then there was Zumba, and then there was some health and fitness, and this is how you do it. But that's my spiritual connection, trying to find out, God, how do you want me to do this thing? And it also heals me. It continues to heal me as I continue to give my service and as I continue to motivate people. So however you do it, tap in, pray, talk, have a conversation, meditate. We call it a lot of different things. Prayer is meditation, it's conversation. You can do yoga, it takes you to a different place, and it's awesome, it's very relaxing. Get yourself involved with some things, or don't forget to continue to live and do the things that you've always loved to do. So if you had a hobby and you love to bike ride, or you love to feed the homeless, continue to do that. Continue to do that. That's still tapping into your spiritual life, because as we were talking about at lunch, ministry is outside. Ministry is not, I go to this church or I go and I worship at this edifice. No, that's a group of people, of believers, are supposed to fellowship, but ministry is outside. And we give our service, that's outside. So continue to do your activities, continue to be a blessing. And you might have to find some new things. Look at life a little bit differently after diagnosis. Ask God, what is he still asking? If you're still here, there's something to do. There's absolutely still something to do. When you wake up every day, there's a reason why you woke up. So you can always tap in to find what's new for you. What do you do next? Maybe you need to set some new goals. Maybe you need to have a new plan. Maybe you need to create a bucket list. How many people have a bucket list? Wow. Okay. I don't have a bucket list. And I've thought about that. Do I need to sit down and think about some things I want to do that I've never done because I'm still here? So, and that's that, I believe. It's the never-ending journey. Your spiritual walk is the never-ending journey. As long as we're here, it is a never-ending journey. And I wanted to add that because throughout this, I was preparing for this, I kept hearing Rena say that. it began at the beginning. It began at your diagnosis, and it's always going to be with you forever. So, and she said to me, do what you do as a minister and speak to the people on that level. Talk about what's been working for you. And so I found that it is never going to end as long as I'm doing my spiritual walk. As long as I'm walking the way I'm supposed to, this journey is never going to end.
She can talk.
Thank you. Are you still recording? Can you? So with